Okay, in this video, we're going to focus on the strengths and weaknesses of taxation reform policies and have a look at some certain questions that you might get and how you can apply these strengths and weaknesses. So starting with the strengths, one of the key strengths of the changes has been that the new changes are really likely to promote both domestic and foreign investment. So given that the lower company tax rate, that may encourage both businesses to invest, but will also encourage increased foreign investment because they'll be taxed at a lower rate for any profits they make here as well. So that will create more income available for investment. And when they get future income, that'll lose less of it to the government. So this will be a way to attract new businesses to set up in Australia, given that our tax rates are more competitive than they are overseas. Greater investment should help to boost living standards in the future, helping to boost our productive capacity because we get access to new investment, new ideas, new technology from overseas, which leads to lower prices and better products in the future. Therefore, businesses have an increased willingness and ability to supply, which should help them to purchase the latest technology, and combined with well-trained labour can boost what is produced each hour. So lower company tax rates effectively lower the cost of production for businesses, and any future business ventures will now be at a lower cost, which will increase supply to the right. Increased retained earnings and lower future tax rates also provide the incentive to allocate more resources to research and development. So any benefits from research and development will then get taxed at a lower rate as well. So you could really hone in on this in your answer as well, that incentive to increase research and development that stems from increased capital investment as opposed due to the lower company tax rates. The second strength is that it provides incentive for more skilled workers to migrate to Australia, so it gives us access to the best quality talent. If we're able to lower income taxes than other countries, those whose skills are in high demand might choose, hey, Australia is the best option for me to set up and start my own business. Living standards could therefore be improved because of the influx of overseas workers, which might boost productivity and lower prices in the workplace. Income tax was encourage worker productivity and improvements in productivity. Those on performance-based pay are likely to work harder, and it may lead to higher wages as well. So the income tax case can help to increase disposable income, which is a particular strength in our low-wage environment. So if you're going to go with this one as a point of difference, make it really clear that lower income taxes are really important at the moment to try and stimulate consumption, given that we are in such a low-wage environment and wages are growing so slowly. So if we want people to spend more, we really need to give them tax cuts because, hey, our wages aren't actually going up. Most taxes are being placed on goods with negative externalities. So this new tax system is discouraging people to consume goods and services with negative externalities, which also are harmful for investment in productivity. Because if we're smoking a lot, that affects people's health and therefore makes them less productive. So that makes the tax system more efficient. And this one here, this is used in a lot of answers, including the one that's coming up later in the video. But one strength of taxation reform is that it can target particular areas of the economy and can simultaneously achieve all three domestic macroeconomic goals. So a company tax cut, for example, will reduce firms' costs of production and increase their willingness and ability to supply, which shifts supply to the right. This will allow for increased growth, increased output, and increased jobs, alongside lower inflationary pressures. So the demand for labour increases because of more investment, because of lower prices, but that also leads to lower inflation because of the lower cost of production and increased growth. So there's a real focus for your answers, is that ability to tax reforms to target all three goals simultaneously. In terms of weaknesses, it could argue that the new tax system relies heavily on regressive taxes and less on progressive taxes. So that could be argued that it hurts equity in the distribution of income. That can lead to a bigger Gini coefficient. So basically, the bigger the Gini coefficient, the more unequal the distribution of income. That can lead to a bigger Lorenz curve shifts to the right, and it can reduce the purchasing power and living standards of low-income earners. So low-income households will have to allocate a larger percentage of their income to paying things like GST, and will lead to a bigger gap between the rich and the poor, which may have particular social and economic problems for society, particularly for non-material living standards. Tax reforms can face long implementation lags. This is a really common one. So, for example, the recent company tax rates took a long time to get through both houses of Parliament, and therefore they were stalled in the Senate for more than 2 years, and therefore they took a long time to have the desired effect on economic growth. There's also little evidence that lower personal incomes have actually boosted efficiency. So some that argue higher tax rates actually force people to work harder. So you could argue that lower income tax rates may just encourage people to work less because they don't need to work as much to get the same disposable income. So tax cuts may lead to reduced worker productivity. They can also lead to bigger structural budget deficits, which may make it harder for the government to maintain public goods and services and provide adequate infrastructure. So to ensure these tax reforms don't hurt the budget, we should also only reduce taxes that are hurting effort and growth. So it's really important that you link the fact to that maybe some people will work less hard, and some of these tax reforms reduce government revenue, which might make it harder to provide infrastructure and other public goods which are useful for productivity. The lower company tax rates may not have the desired effect if businesses do not see it as a potential to increase their market size. They basically may just save the money, and therefore they don't have the desired effect. And similarly with company taxes, and you can use this all as the same weakness, our company tax rate is still higher than most overseas nations. So the OECD average is 24.9. Ours are still 27.5. They're going down to 25, but they're still 27.5. So overall, you could still argue they're deterring foreign investment and trade. So we still rely heavily on direct taxes, income and company taxes. So there's still a lot of work to be done to try and promote, to try and encourage people to invest in Australia. Okay, so here's two questions to finish off this video. It says, describe the changes made to the company tax rate in the federal budget in 17-18 and two ways that might help to boost aggregate supply. So this is a bit of an old question, but the link to aggregate supply is what's the most important. So the government's continued to alter the company tax rate. With businesses with a turnover of less than 10 million will face a tax cut of 27.5%. So this is an old policy. So don't worry too much about the policy, but linking it to the supply is the key thing. Lower company tax rates can boost aggregate supply in a range of ways. Lower tax rates increase the retained earnings for businesses because they don't have to pay the government as much in taxation. This enables them to allocate more resources to investment. This increases in demand in the short run, but in the long term, the investment helps to increase productive capacity and therefore boost productivity and boost our overall supply. So the first one is the encouragement of investment spending because of the lower company tax rates. A second reason, therefore businesses have increased ability and willingness to supply. They could purchase the latest technology, the best machinery, which will help to increase output per unit of input. Second reason is they lower cost of production for businesses. This means that they can be more profitable while keeping their prices low and more willing to supply. So the lower cost of production increase their willingness and ability to supply. So the first one's about increased investment. The second one is associated with lower cost of production. And I've actually mentioned three here. The third one, increased retained earnings and lower future tax rates also provide the incentive to allocate more resources to research and development and technological innovation. So spending in this area is also associated with greater productivity and increased ability to supply, which lowers prices as well. So there's three reasons you can link there. One, increased investment spending in new machinery and capital. Two, lower cost of production. And three, increased incentive for research and development, all of which lower cost of production, increased incentive to supply, and lower prices. Last question is discuss one strength and one weakness of tax reforms in terms of how it influenced the goal of strong and sustainable economic growth. So there's 6 marks in it for this, and basically as a mark allocation, I would say 1 for defining the goal, and then kind of 3 marks for explaining, or maybe 2 marks for explaining how taxation reforms are designed to achieve strong and sustainable growth. So the idea of increasing productivity, increasing participation, lowering cost of production, increasing workers' effort. So all of that stuff can be elaborated on for 2 or 3 marks. And then your last 3 marks is for explaining, okay, what's the particular strength of this policy and what's the particular weakness of this policy. So here's an example of an answer that might be, say, a 4 out of 6. So they provide an example of the company tax cuts. They talk about how they can boost aggregate supply, but they don't specifically mention in detail a specific strength. They just focus on the impact. They don't go into enough detail. So we'll just focus mainly on the good answer because there's no point in going to that one in too much detail. Here's half of the good answer. So company tax such as those outlined in the Australian government's 10-year tax plan will result in lower cost of production for businesses and improve their willingness and ability to supply. An increase in aggregate supply, or the total volume of goods and services available for sale, will help to increase output as measured by GDP and exert downward pressure on the general price level. This is a distinct strength of aggregate supply policies, such as tax reform, making a particularly potent option for boosting strong and sustainable or non-inflationary growth. This cannot be achieved by demand policy, such as monetary policy, because lower interest rates will stimulate demand and promote stronger growth. However, they can also lead to higher inflation levels. However, it may not lead to growth unless there's spare capacity in the economy. So it's talking about how these policies are better because they achieve growth alongside low inflation and alongside full employment, unlike your demand policies, which are only useful if we have spare capacity. Company tax cuts, however, require parliamentary approval to come into effect, and that can take a long time. So, for example, the proposed cut to the company tax rate of 25%, which has now been passed for those over $50 million, this part of the 10-year enterprise tax plan was rejected by the Senate in 2018. This is a distinct weakness of tax reforms, as the failure to gain parliamentary approval limited its ability to boost aggregate supply and boost growth. So basically, if you can't get it through Parliament, it's a waste of time and it's not effective. It could be argued that extending the company tax rate to more businesses in the current economic environment where economic growth is slow and the global economic outlook is increasingly uncertain would have given the economy the support it needs. But given that we're at this period where the government's not passing them on, they're not having the desired effect that we need them to. Review. Sample response A explains the operation of tax reforms, but does not specifically state how this is a strength of the policy in relation to the goal. While it states the weakness of tax reform, it does not provide a specific link to the macroeconomic goal. So if you get asked for a strength and weakness in relation to a goal, you need to link it back to that goal. So the fact that it takes a long time to get through Parliament is a particular weakness for stimulating growth, because it's not going to stimulate growth unless it's passed. A particular strength is the fact that it can target the strong and sustainable elements, the fact that it can boost production but also reduce inflation. So part B explains the strength and weakness, but also makes a clear link to the goal of strong and sustainable growth. It also makes a clear link between the weakness and strong and sustainable growth. E.g., takes a while to get through Parliament, doesn't help unless it gets passed. That's the key things you need to do in those questions. Thank you.